Let's get right into it. Every time you cross a threshold, a doorway, a gate, the entrance to a room, your brain quietly goes into full-on supercomputer mode. It scans, calculates. It makes dozens of unconscious decisions before you've even processed the smell of the carpet. And you have absolutely no idea it's happening. You think you just walked into a kitchen. Your brain thinks it just deployed a tactical field unit into unfamiliar territory. The gap between those two realities is exactly what this video is about. So buckle up, because the math your brain is doing behind your back is equal parts fascinating, disturbing, and wildly impressive, and you've been doing it your whole life without a single receipt. Number 10. The Threat Audit. Before you even clock the color of the walls, your brain has already asked one question. Is something in here going to kill me? Not in a dramatic, cinematic way. Not like you're scanning for assassins. More like a background process running silently while your conscious self is thinking about whether there's leftover pizza. The moment you enter a new space, your amygdala, the tiny, paranoid almond in your brain's emotional basement, fires up and starts cross-referencing your current environment against every threat it's ever logged. Dark corners, unfamiliar sounds, blocked exits, faces that look slightly too tense. It's doing all of this in roughly 200 milliseconds, which is faster than you can blink. This is called a threat appraisal, and it's a deeply ancient reflex. Your ancestors needed it to survive stepping into caves, clearings, and unfamiliar territories. You need it to survive stepping into your in-laws' living room, which honestly isn't that different. The nervous system doesn't know the ice age is over. It just knows new space, unknown variables, calculate. What's genuinely unsettling about this is that your body reacts before your brain can explain why. Your pupils dilate. Your muscles get a microshot of tension. Your hearing sharpens slightly. All of this happens before your rational mind has finished forming the thought, I am entering a room. The threat audit is so fast, so automated, and so ancient that your consciousness is basically a late-arriving journalist trying to write a headline about an event that already happened. The really fun part? If the room passes the audit, no threats detected, you never feel it. The anxiety vanishes before it even registers as anxiety. But if something does feel off in a new space, and you can't explain why, that's not a hunch. That's your amygdala filing an incident report. Number 9. The social geometry calculation. Okay, so the room isn't going to eat you. Great. Now your brain immediately pivots to its second most urgent question. Where do I rank in this room? This is where it gets socially terrifying. The second you walk into a space with other people in it, your brain begins running what researchers call social dominance mapping. A real-time calculation of every person's apparent status, mood, attention direction, and threat level. You are, without knowing it, triangulating your position in an invisible social hierarchy within seconds of entry. You notice who's talking the most, who has the physical center of the room, who's looking at you, who's deliberately not looking at you, and what the difference between those two things means. Your brain is also absorbing microsignals from body language, posture, vocal tone, and clothing, all simultaneously, and weaving it into a rough social map that tells you, asterisk, am I welcome here? Do I have power in this space? Should I be small or can I take up room? Asterisk. This is rooted in primate behavior, and it is absolutely relentless. Even if you're walking into a room full of your closest friends, the calculation still runs. It just resolves quickly and quietly because the data is familiar. But walk into a party where you don't know anyone, the calculation takes longer. Which is why standing in the doorway of a party full of strangers produces that specific, horrible feeling of your soul trying to exit your body through your back. Psychologists call this affiliation threat, the fear of not fitting into the social structure of a new space. And your brain is so committed to solving it that it will literally manufacture reasons to linger in doorways, pretend to check your phone, or suddenly become very interested in a plant, just to buy itself more processing time before committing to a social position. You're not awkward. You're just running a very complex program on hardware that was designed 100,000 years ago. Number 8. The invisible floor plan. Here's something your brain does that sounds like something out of a spy movie. It immediately builds a 3D spatial model of any room you enter, and stores it automatically without your permission into long-term memory. This is called cognitive mapping, and the region responsible for it is your hippocampus, which is shaped like a seahorse and absolutely loves architecture. The moment you walk into a new space, your hippocampus begins constructing what neuroscientists call an allocentric map, a U-independent spatial model of the environment. Not just where you are relative to things, but where things are relative to each other. It records walls, furniture, exit routes, obstacles, and distances with an accuracy that would embarrass most amateur photographers. And here's the wild part. You don't have to try. You don't have to consciously memorize anything. The hippocampus just does it. It builds the map the way your lungs breathe, automatically, silently, and completely without your involvement. Which is why, if the lights suddenly went out in a room you entered 30 seconds ago, you'd still have a rough operational knowledge of where the furniture is. You weren't paying attention to the furniture. Your hippocampus was. This is also why you can navigate your childhood home in the dark, years after you last visited. That map got filed. It's in a drawer. Your hippocampus kept it. Studies have shown that experienced taxi drivers in cities with complex street layouts have physically larger hippocampi than average. The brain region literally grows in response to spatial demand. So every room you enter is adding a data point to a spatial library your conscious mind doesn't even know exists. You're basically walking around with a Google Maps that updates in real time and you never once open the app. Number 7. The doorway effect. Picture this. You're sitting on your couch and you remember something critically important. You need to grab your phone charger from the bedroom. You get up with purpose. You walk with intention. You cross the hallway. You push open the bedroom door. And then you stand there, staring into the middle distance like a golden retriever who just forgot what a ball is. The charger is gone. The thought is gone. You are gone. This is called the doorway effect, and it is one of the most studied and most personally humiliating things your brain does on a daily basis. Psychologists at the University of Notre Dame ran a series of experiments in which participants were asked to carry objects and answer questions while moving through either a virtual or a physical environment. Every single time a participant crossed through a doorway, not just changed rooms but specifically crossed a threshold, their recall dropped significantly compared to when they moved the same distance within a single room. The leading explanation is something called an event boundary. Your brain doesn't experience life as one long continuous stream. It breaks experience up into episodes, chunks of context that get mentally filed together. And doorways, it turns out, are one of the brain's favorite places to declare, okay, that episode is over, new file. When you walk through a door, your brain closes the mental folder it had open and starts a fresh one. Whatever was in the old folder, archived, possibly in a very inconvenient place. The reason this evolved is actually logical. Compartmentalizing experience into distinct spatial events helps with memory organization and cognitive efficiency. Your brain doesn't want your bedroom thoughts bleeding into your kitchen thoughts. It's trying to be tidy. Unfortunately, tidy in this context means you will walk into a room with absolute certainty and walk out with absolutely nothing multiple times per week for the rest of your life. The best workaround researchers have found? Mentally narrate what you're going to do before you cross the threshold. Say it out loud if you have to. You're essentially forcing the new episode to open with the information from the last one. It works. It also makes you look completely insane to anyone watching. Number 6. The emotional thermostat reading. Walk into a room where two people just finished arguing. You weren't there for a single second of it. The fight is over. Everyone's sitting down. No one says a word about it. And yet, you feel it immediately, in that specific way that has no real name but everyone knows exactly what it is. The air is thick. Something is off. The vibe is bad and you absorbed it the moment you crossed the threshold. Your brain just read the room. Literally. This is not mysticism. This is your brain running an extremely sophisticated emotional environment scan that researchers call affective synchrony detection. When you enter a space, you unconsciously pick up on dozens of microsignals simultaneously: the angle of people's bodies, the specific flatness in someone's voice, the way eye contact is happening or pointedly not happening, the microtension in facial muscles that haven't quite relaxed yet. Your brain synthesizes all of this data into a single emotional read of the room's collective internal state. And it delivers the result not as a logical conclusion, but as a feeling, a gut sense, a vibe. The neuroscience behind this involves your brain's mirror neuron system, a network of neurons that fires both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. These neurons don't just copy physical movements. Research suggests they simulate emotional states too. When you walk into a room full of stressed people, your mirror neurons start simulating stress responses. You haven't been told anything. You don't have any evidence. But your body starts responding to an emotional environment the way a tuning fork responds to sound, by resonating with it. This is why spending time around chronically anxious people makes you feel anxious, and why walking into a room full of laughing people is almost physically impossible to resist joining. You are not separate from the emotional field of the spaces you enter. You are a node in it, being calculated and calibrated the second you arrive. Your brain didn't just walk into the room, plugged into it. Number 5. The exit architecture obsession. Without realizing it, every time you sit down in a new space, a restaurant, a waiting room, a movie theater, an unfamiliar office, you quietly, automatically note where the exits are. Not because you're paranoid, not because you've taken a self-defense course, because your brain is constitutionally incapable of settling into an environment it can't escape from. This is called exit-seeking behavior, and it is so deeply wired into human cognition that it influences where people choose to sit given free choice, how long they stay in an environment, and even how much they enjoy themselves while they're there. Studies on restaurant seating, for example, have consistently found that people prefer seats with their backs to the wall and a clear sightline to the entrance. Not because anyone told them to. Not because they're in a Western film. Because that configuration satisfies a prehistoric checklist in their nervous system that says, I can see what's coming, and I know how to leave. The psychological term for the discomfort of not having this is environmental entrapment. And even mild versions of it create low-grade stress responses. Being seated in the middle of a large room, surrounded by people with no clear sightline to an exit, activates the same threat detection circuitry as, on a much smaller scale, being physically cornered. Your brain reads, I don't know how to get out of here quickly, as a legitimate warning signal. And it begins emitting a subtle, low-level anxiety to let you know. This is also why certain spaces feel instinctively uncomfortable in ways you can't articulate. A room with very few windows, a chair facing a wall, a booth tucked into a corner where you can't see the front door. Nothing bad is happening. Nothing bad is going to happen. But your nervous system filed an objection the moment you sat down, and it's not withdrawing it. The irony is that modern architecture almost never accounts for this. Designers optimize for aesthetics, flow, and square footage. Your amygdala is optimizing for escape routes. And in that disagreement, the amygdala always wins. You can enjoy a beautiful room and still feel vaguely wrong in it, and now you know exactly why. Number 4. The ownership illusion. There's a specific feeling you get when you walk into a space that is yours. Your bedroom, your office, your corner of the couch that everyone in the house knows is yours even though no one has ever formally discussed it. The moment you enter that space, something in your posture shifts. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing changes. Your voice, if you're speaking, gets slightly louder without you noticing. You expand. Physically, behaviorally, psychologically, you take up more room. This is not confidence. This is your brain executing a deeply automatic territorial response that psychologists call home advantage cognition, and it is so powerful that it measurably affects your performance, your decision-making, and your willingness to take risks, all based purely on whether the space you're standing in feels like yours. Research on this goes back decades and cuts across species, but the human version is particularly interesting because we extend territorial ownership to spaces we don't actually own. You feel a version of home advantage in your regular coffee shop seat, in the classroom desk you've been sitting in for a semester, in the specific spot on the gym floor you use for warm-ups. You didn't buy these spaces. You have no legal claim to them, but you've occupied them enough times that your brain has tagged them as part of your territory, and walking into them activates the same neurological ease as walking into your actual home. The flip side of this is equally revealing. When you walk into someone else's clearly established territory, their office, their home, a space where their ownership is socially unmistakable, your brain runs the exact opposite calculation and immediately begins suppressing your own behavioral expansion. You speak more carefully. You move more deliberately. You ask before touching things. You are, without anyone saying a word about it, receiving and responding to invisible territorial information embedded in the space itself. The objects in a room, trophies, photos, personalized mugs, the specific arrangement of a desk, are not decoration. They are territorial markers broadcasting ownership information to every brain that walks through the door. Your brain reads them all. It adjusts accordingly. And you call it reading the room, as if you're doing something subtle and social, when really your nervous system just processed a territorial broadcast like a very sophisticated, anxious antenna. Number 3. The smell memory detonator. You walk into a room and it smells like something. Maybe it's a specific cleaning product. Maybe it's old wood and something floral. Maybe it's the particular combination of carpet and central heating that only exists in buildings built in a certain decade. And before your brain has done anything else, before the threat audit, before the social geometry, before any of it, a memory detonates. Fully formed, emotionally loaded, from somewhere so far back you almost can't identify where it came from. Your grandmother's hallway, a classroom from primary school, a hospital waiting room you sat in once for 4 hours and thought you'd forgotten entirely. It's back. All of it. In an instant. Because of a smell. This is called the Proust phenomenon, named after the French writer who described it so precisely in the early 1900s that neuroscientists eventually borrowed his name for it, which is the most literary thing that has ever happened in a laboratory. The reason smell triggers memory so explosively compared to other senses comes down to anatomy. Your olfactory system, the smell processing machinery in your brain, is the only sense that has a direct, unfiltered connection to the hippocampus and the amygdala. Every other sense routes through the thalamus first, which acts like a sensory middleman, organizing and processing information before passing it along. Smell bypasses the middleman entirely. It goes straight to the emotional core. This means smell-triggered memories don't arrive the way visually triggered memories do, vague, reconstructed, slightly uncertain. They arrive with the full emotional weight of the original experience still attached, which is why they feel less like remembering something and more like being briefly transported. The room you walked into isn't just a room. It's a key. And your brain just opened a door you didn't know was still locked. What makes this particularly strange is that you can't choose not to respond to it. You can close your eyes. You can put in earplugs. You can avoid looking at something. You cannot hold your nose forever. Smell is the only sense your brain processes with that kind of raw, unmediated urgency, and every time you walk into a room, you are one errant scent away from a completely involuntary emotional time machine. Your brain isn't just processing the room. In some cases, it's processing 17 rooms it's been in before all at once, all because someone decided to use a specific brand of floor cleaner. Number 2. The resource inventory. Here's a fun thing to know about yourself. You are, at this very moment, probably better at locating free food in a room than you think you are. Not because you're particularly food-focused, because your brain has been running an automatic resource inventory scan in every room you enter since before you could walk. This behavior is called resource detection, and it lives in some of the oldest evolutionary architecture in your brain, the parts you share with animals that have been sniffing out food and shelter since long before humans showed up. When you enter a new space, your brain automatically directs a portion of your attentional bandwidth toward scanning for resources. Food, water, comfort, warmth, useful objects. It prioritizes these things in your visual field without telling you it's doing so, which is why you almost always clock the snack table at a party before you've consciously decided to look for one. You weren't looking. Your brain was looking. You just received the location report. This is also why real estate agents have known forever that baking bread or brewing coffee before a showing makes properties feel more appealing. It's not just that the smell is pleasant. It's that your brain's resource detection system registers the olfactory signal of available food and immediately bumps the environment's unconscious safety and abundance rating upward. The house didn't get better. Your ancestral hindbrain just got quietly optimistic. Beyond food, This scan also picks up on comfort signals, soft seating, available warmth, personal space, the presence of adequate light. Researchers studying environmental psychology have found that people make unconscious stay or leave micro-decisions about spaces within the first 30 seconds of entering them, and a significant driver of that decision is whether the resource scan returned positive results. A room that is comfortable, well-lit, and has easily available food or drink will retain people longer. Not because anyone consciously decided to stay, but because the inventory came back favorable. You're not choosing your favorite rooms. Your brain is pre-selecting them based on a checklist you've never seen, using criteria that were last updated roughly 50,000 years ago. The cozy cafe with the good lighting and the pastry display isn't just nice. It's evolutionarily irresistible. And that, honestly, feels like the most respectable reason to go to a cafe that anyone has ever come up with. Number 1, the person-shaped hole. Every room you walk into, your brain doesn't just map the furniture, scan for threats, read the social temperature, and log the exits. It does one final thing, something quieter, stranger, and in some ways the most human thing on this entire list. It looks for where you fit. Not physically, socially, emotionally, narratively. Your brain arrives in a new space and begins constructing what psychologists call a self-in-context model. A real-time answer to the question, what is my role here? Are you a guest? A host? A stranger? An expert? Someone who belongs here without explanation? Or someone who has to earn their place? The room, the people in it, the social signals embedded in its design and atmosphere, all of it feeds into a rapid identity calibration that your brain runs automatically every single time without exception. This is why you behave differently in different rooms, even when you're trying not to. Not because you're fake. Because your brain is doing the mathematically rational thing, adjusting your self-presentation to match the social context of the space. You are quieter in libraries not just because of the social norm, but because the room's signals activate a specific you in your behavioral repertoire. You are funnier at a party than in a job interview not because you're performing, but because your brain calculated a different role for each room and deployed the corresponding version of you without asking. The research behind this involves a concept called situated cognition. The idea that thought and behavior are not just products of your internal state, but are fundamentally shaped by the physical and social environment you're in. You are not a fixed self moving through neutral spaces. You are a dynamic, context-sensitive system that is constantly being partially constructed by the rooms you enter. The space shapes the person. The person is never entirely portable, which means every room you've ever walked into has made you, briefly, a slightly different version of yourself. Every threshold you've crossed has recalibrated something. Every space has asked your brain a set of silent questions, and your brain has answered all of them without hesitation, without being asked, and without ever once sending you a notification. You've been doing advanced mathematics your whole life. You just didn't know the subject. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.